Welcome to the Sales SOS podcast, where we answer your sales distress calls. I'm your host, Liz Hyman, bringing the rescue boat to your sales challenges. In this ever-changing sales environment, it's easy for leaders to feel adrift. We're here to be the beacon guiding you to success. Each episode, I'm joined by top sales experts and practitioners who have navigated this waters and come out victorious. Together, we'll uncover the insights and strategies that will help you hit your sales targets and grow your business. So if you're ready to turn your sales distress into sales success, you're in the right place. Let's dive into today's topic. Welcome to the Sales SOS podcast. I'm Liz Hyman, and I'm here with your Sales SOS podcast crew, and we have been talking about sales math. What is the math that you need to understand in order to run your organization and your sales team and your marketing team? So we've been talking about this math, and I'm going to say a quote that I said earlier, which is I've heard over and over recently, it doesn't matter how many calls you make. It just matters the quality of the call. That may be true, that the quality of the call, in fact, it is true. The quality of the call is super important, but there's still a funnel. There's still math. And we often want to see those numbers look better. We want a better conversion rate in marketing activity, or we want a better close ratio between conversation and close, or we want a higher ratio of the proposals that we send out to close. So if we're looking at this math, or we want our salespeople to onboard faster and have a higher return on investment sooner, if we want to improve some of these numbers, I just threw a lot out there. This is a 7-day seminar we could be having on this topic. The next year, we will cover all of these topics. But, where do you start? Where do you start with improving the math, the results?
I'll add on this one. I'll jump in. We talked a couple episodes ago about the importance of mapping out a buyer's journey, right? And understanding how long that real cycle is, like not just from talking to close, but what does it take in their mind? When did they start this process and when did they close, right? So looking at it from their perspective. And when you have that mapped out, and we talked in another episode where we talked about some of the activities within that and understanding the ROI of those activities within them, when you kind of map those to the points of where the buyer is along the way, now you can really look at where you see things speed up and where you see things break down. And those make it very easy to start figuring out where to optimize in your revenue machine, right? In your growth machine. Like, where do you dig in and kind of figure out where to optimize? And it gives you some common language across the entire revenue organization. It also gives you some data points. So it's not a complete guess.
So if you're not measuring and you don't have process, all you have is chaos. You can't really figure out where you're optimizing. Right?
And mapping comes even before measuring.
Right.
Right.
Mike, what you got for us?
Just like when you talk about math, if we just get to the basics, what can we do? We can add things, we can subtract things, we can multiply things, we can divide things, right? Like just basic elementary school math, right? So add, subtract, multiply, divide. Every time you add in a new variable, is that variable, is the thing to the left of the variable a plus sign? Is it a multiplication sign? Is it a subtraction sign? Is it a division sign? If you don't know where it fits, it's going to be really hard to evolve and adjust your math and optimize for the right math inside your organization. So that's what I would add to that piece.
Daryl, what you got for us?
Okay, I'm going to be different. I'm not directly going to answer the question. How do we change the
Daryl,
math? Yeah.
Say that again because you froze up a little bit.
No problem. Sorry. I said, I'm going to be different. I'm not going to directly answer the question, but it is related. the question is, how do we change the math to make things better? And what I see over and over again, all of us have talked about it over this whole 4-episode series, is this. To change the math, everybody in the leadership role needs to do the following. Have agreement and consensus on the assumptions in the math. Have agreement and consensus on the key metrics. You can't boil the ocean with 42 metrics. All right. So what are the key 3, 4, 5 metrics you're going to use to measure your progress as you improve? Everybody has to look at the math holistically. In other words, I see this over and over again. Sales will only look at it from a sales point of view and not even give two shits about marketing. Marketing will only look at it from a marketing point of view and not even freaking understand sales. All right. So how do you change the math? Everybody understands the math challenges every leader in their role has. You look at it holistically because you're representing the revenue of the company, not just your team. And then whenever you change the math throughout the year, because you will, for example, I'm going to go hire 6 more reps that we didn't budget for initially because things are going swimmingly. Then you can physically come back to those assumptions and say, do they still apply? You can actually understand why one team might be objecting to the change in math because you took the time out to understand their challenges in their math at the beginning of the process. It's about socializing. So getting everybody on board. Call it what you will. Renee, Liz, Mike have all talked about this. And this is what I see not happen and why companies fail over and over and over again. And part of changing the math, this is the biggest part, and people hate this. CEOs hate it. Leaders hate it. They hate it either because it makes me insecure, or they hate it because I'm afraid of conflict. Is you need to be able to challenge the math, whether it's my math or your math, respectfully, to drive down and drill out any gremlins. Make sure that we're not making assumptions that we're not aware of that are impacting the results of the math. There you go. Long-winded. Apologize.
So I want to jump into that because I think that when I said here, let's change, how do we change the math? We can't change the math and not understand that we have to change the activity.
Yes.
So just because you in your head change the math, you increase the revenue goal, or you cut the number of people, or you added to the number of people, or you, whatever it is that you changed in the math, you now have to have system, process, activity that supports that change. So if we want the math to look better, we can't just say, we're going to start having a 30% close ratio from proposal to close instead of 20%. You can't just say that. You have to then understand, why do we have a 20% close ratio? How does that stand in the marketplace? What do other companies' close ratios look like? What can we do to improve the close ratios? Well, and where do we start that process? Do we start that up in marketing, where we are more targeted in our activity toward people who are our ideal customers, so that when the leads come to sales, there's fewer leads, but they're better qualified and more ready to close? Like, what levers are you pulling, as Renee was talking about earlier? What levers are you pulling to make this math change? It doesn't just change by itself. Just because you decide you're cutting somebody or adding something doesn't mean, just because you're going to get the salespeople more leads doesn't mean they have the capacity to handle more leads. So how are you changing the formula all the way through? Not just how are you changing the outcome math? Mike, what you got for me? Because you're smiling. I see it.
You'd see it. The nonverbal strikes again. So so a couple of things that came up there. Daryl was talking about don't boil the ocean from a total number of metrics that are out there. We've talked about this in the past. The role reflective model. What's the thing, the metric, so what? Why does it matter? Now what? What are we going to do? And if you can't answer those three questions related to a data point that you're tracking, then I would challenge you on your decision making on whether or not that metric is really an important metric. Many times people will implement RevOps into an organization, and the RevOps person will go through a HubSpot certification program, and they'll talk about all of the metrics that need to be in there and all of the different data points that we should be collecting. And the reality is they overcomplicate their system. So take that role reflective model and assess the metrics. When you have your metrics, to hit on the point that came up around creating alignment inside the business, start looking at how each of those conversion metrics can be treated as leading indicators for one group and a lagging indicator for another group. And as those metrics come together, now you really force a common language, a common sense of purpose, a common area of focus across those teams that are connected, whether it's demand or acquisition or retention and expansion or fulfillment or operations or whatever they are. And you start to connect those pieces together. That can be the connective tissue inside your organization that will bring this alignment that will ultimately create that opportunity for impact. So again, super complicated as you add more variables, very hard to do. But once it doesn't need to be as complicated as many of us make it.
I mentioned when we kind of went back on setting the math, right? That when we talked about all this magic math, that, you just get assigned, that there are going to be a decent number of revenue leaders who are handed numbers and have to just they're told make it work, right? When you get into this optimization is where you're going to get a lot of help. And again, Mike says, don't fail alone. Daryl says it's team, right? Like you got to work together and figure this out, because whatever one of you does, it's a whole system. It's not marketing, sales, customer success, whatever. It's a whole system. Whatever one of you does will impact the other. But this is the time where you often have to, I will say that there will be some tweaks that are relatively easy. You tweak your system, you do whatever, right? Like you're going for efficiencies there. Everybody has small places that they can make efficiencies, but a lot of companies have really tweaked that efficiency lever a lot, right? And for the most part, when we get into this optimization, when we're handed magic math, like, sorry, this is just what has to happen this year. We don't want to have layoffs. If we don't want to, if we're going to get the next capital raise, whatever it is, like these numbers we have to hit these numbers. Now you got to get into, how do you solve magic math? You have to do something new. It's not an efficiency play if you are assigned magic math. You sure go do it. It's your responsibility. You got to find that and do that where you can. But you're going to have to do something new, and you need to look at where those conversion numbers in that journey, where you have the most opportunity to improve, and think of new things to try. And this is where that risk tolerance really needs to go up, right? Like you need to be open to doing things together. We pick on SaaS. I'll use the same example. So let's say you require a demo for your SaaS and your calendar availability is really tight, but you've gotten this magic math number and you can't hire somebody in sales. Okay, what's a new thing you can do? Let's do a group call, because you know what happens? Magic happens when customers get in there, when customers and prospects get in there together and they start talking about their problems together, and you can lead the conversation and be all of a sudden you could start weaning out the people who aren't ready yet and the people who are ready. And by the way, the people who are ready are going to convince the people who aren't ready yet too. And now you have a cleaner way of getting into sales in that calendar availability that's very precious right now. Right? That would be a new thing, but it's very scary for a lot of people. It's a high risk thing all of a sudden, particularly for the sales rep to say, what? You're going to put a group of people together before I ever get to talk to them, right? Like you have to work together. But if you have magic math coming at you, whatever you've done before and tweaks probably isn't going to do it. You're probably going to have to do something new. And that's when that risk tolerance needs to come up and you have to work together.
So I want to kind of add to that, because this magic math, these WAGs, this whatever, these arbitrary numbers that are handed to a sales team, they're just numbers. And we tend to think it's a strategy. Here's your number, go. And in order to hit a number, you need both strategy and tactics. And that is what, Mike and Daryl and Renee have been talking about. It's the whole team. That goes up to the highest levels in the organization. If we are going to do this, what are we going to do differently? What are we going to stop doing when we start doing this new thing? What are we, again, which verticals are we going to look at? Which markets are we going to look at? Which buyers are we going to work out differently? Which tools are we going to use? Which channels are we going to, like, all of those things play into your strategy. How are you getting there? And then you can start looking at the actual tactics of doing it. But to just throw a number at your sales team and say, go with the resources that you have, doing what you've always been doing. Yeah, sales leader, you just figure it out. It doesn't make sense, because what will happen is your sales team will then be focused on revenue. And those sales, that revenue may have no strategic relevance to where you're trying to take the company. It will hit your sales number this year, may get you your funding, but you may have all the wrong clients. I had a client who literally had a year of funding. He did not have to sell anything for a year because he was trying to build this entire infrastructure. Instead of doing that, he wanted to look really good to investors. So he went out and he sold to the wrong client because they were easy to sell to. And he built an entire product to match that client because they were easy to sell to, and that would bring him revenue. But it completely undermined his effort toward his larger goal. You can't just say, go sell, because salespeople will sell the easiest, fastest thing they can sell. They will not sell what is strategically relevant. So when you throw a number at somebody and leave it at that, you're making a mistake. Figuring out how you will hit those revenue numbers is a high-level decision. Go, Daryl.
You've inspired me, Liz. And you prompted something I should have said a long time ago. I'm going to state if any sales leader here, I'm going to state the obvious. But it's amazing how often I don't say this, which is, the question was, how do we change the math? How do we, make sure that we support the math? Maybe another way of looking at it, to achieve the goals. The math is there to achieve the goals, right? So that's the objective. Yeah. Once you agree on what the math is, what the assumptions are, what the performance, the projected, anticipated return on investment should be, it's imperative that you financially reward the contributors, your staff, reps, marketers, etc., that you make sure that their compensation plan is structured to drive that outcome. Not just sales reps have bonuses. Marketers should too. And so if it's all about, for example, we've heard us talk about before, we want to increase the sales velocity from maybe a 4-month cycle to a 3-month cycle. And there should be MBO, management by objectives, in there to reward them once that's hit. All right. You want to make sure that human behavior supports the attainment of the math. And that's critical, because if you just sit there expecting I'm going to pay a flat salary, for example, if it's a marketing team, nothing's going to change. Where's the incentive? That's uncomfortable. Change is hard, right? Sales is the same way. We talked about this already. If I'm rewarded more to do customer renewals than I am to do new sales, I'm going to go to renewals, even though the math is around new sales. So you got to change the compensation to support the math.
I would say it's even more critical in the sales environment, simply because of the mindset of people that enter sales.
Yep.
Many of them view themselves as entrepreneurs, right? They're like a little business inside of a business, and their book of business is their book, right? And to your point, they're literally going to run their business. If you just look at it like that, right? They're going to run their business the best way. And if running their business the best way means they make more money on new sales, not upsells, or upsells, not new sales, or whatever, and that's not aligned with the goals of your business, you got a problem, right?
Yep.
Like, and they're doing what they're supposed to do. You have to make that alignment work because that's who you're attracting and that's what you want in sales. I mean, it to some extent, it definitely is for marketers too, but because of commission-based sales attracts far more personalities that view it as entrepreneurial.
Yeah, I think that's a cultural shift we need to make in marketing. Too many marketers are just, happy to schedule the email and press send and clock out at the end of the day. Whether that email converts or not, they did their job. And at the end of the day, it's marketing leadership is truly held accountable for results, the ROI we talked about previously. So if marketers aren't thinking like sales reps, then we've got the wrong marketing team. I agree, sales reps are more inclined to change their behavior because that's their DNA. But we do need to get marketers to think more like, if I do this, am I driving revenue?
Well, remember that a salesperson is compensated only on what they sell, most
Correct.
cases, or they have some compensation, and then the rest of their revenue, the rest of their income is based on what they sell. And I think it's really hard, and we could have a whole conversation, talk about this, a whole set of episodes about this. What is the day in the life of a salesperson? And what is it that motivates them to do the things that they do? And if you put yourself in their shoes and you think about the fact that the only other person in the company whose income depends on sales is the CEO or the owner, and maybe not the CEO, maybe it's just the owner, depending upon how the compensation structure, every single day, that salesperson, whether they eat next month or not, depends on what they sold. So they're driven. We drive their behavior based upon how we compensate them. So we need to make sure we compensate them in a way that drives the behavior we want.
100%. Yeah.
All right, Mike, you got one more thing?
Yeah. And ask your team just a simple question. How do you execute? Like anybody that's on the team, how do you execute? And see what their response is. Some may have no idea what you're talking about, and they are going to need to ask a couple of questions. Some might just go do the work, and they create chaos because they do the work differently every time with everybody else and then engage with multiple people inside the organization. And some actually know how to, know what the difference is between strategy and tactics, know how to create alignment so that the tactics align with the strategy, which ultimately aligns with the goal. But ask your team, how do you execute? And sit back and listen to the answer. And then it will reveal where you should put time, energy, and attention to help them achieve the goals that they're looking for, and which should ultimately help you achieve the goals that you're looking for, which ultimately should help the organization achieve the goals that it's looking for, if all of that alignment is in place. So those are just two words that came up in the conversation that I think were pretty important: execution and alignment.
Liz, can I leave us with one thought too? Because this is another one that I feel really, really strongly about. If we need to improve the math, change the math, do anything, there is one thing you can do universally that will drive the best return, in my opinion. And that is to increase sales and marketing literacy across your entire organization.
Yep.
Because when you do, to the points we've made earlier about don't feel alone, this is a team effort, this is across the entire growth strategy of the company, there are people inside every organization that have a stronghold over a piece or part. And if they don't understand, and that's not necessarily bad, right? Like, because they're owning their area and they're doing a really good job at it, possibly. But if they don't understand marketing and sales, they can't contribute into whatever you're trying to change, whatever math you're trying to improve. When they do, you move it from this downstream activity to more upstream because they bring these changes in, and it is like magic. And marketing and sales literacy is a problem across organizations. It's from startup to enterprise and all the way in between. It is a problem.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us, all of you, for the Sales SOS podcast. Thanks to the sales crew for your great insights. And we will see you if you're here with us live next month, same time, same place, same bat time, same bat channel. I don't know if any of you remember that. And I think next time we're going to be talking about planning for the new year. It's probably late for that conversation. It should probably happen earlier, but that's what we're going to dive into next time. I hope you'll join us.
And that's a wrap of this episode of the Sales SOS podcast. A huge thank you to our experts for throwing us a lifeline with their insights. We hope today's episode has equipped you to navigate the sales seas with confidence. Never miss an episode. Subscribe to the Sales SOS podcast on your favorite platform. If you have questions, comments, or topics you'd like us to explore, join us live on LinkedIn every second Friday, or share your questions on YouTube or LinkedIn. Until next time, keep sailing towards those sales goals. I'm Liz Hyman, your captain here at the Sales SOS podcast, saying smooth sailing and successful selling.